She only wanted milk for her baby. But that night, a stranger's voice changed everything. He said, "I'll pay for it." She didn't know. Those 3 words would cost her heart, her safety, and maybe her soul. The grocery store flickered with tired fluorescent light, its aisles half empty, as if the night itself had forgotten this place existed. The air smelled faintly of old bread and floor cleaner, the kind of scent that clung to loneliness. Lena pushed a squeaky cart with one hand, her baby cradled in the other, wrapped in a faded blue blanket. The child whimpered softly, a tiny sound that pierced through her chest like a slow ache. She smiled weakly at him, pretending strength she didn't have, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mama's here." Her eyes scanned the shelves, milk, formula, diapers, each one a price tag heavier than her hope. She checked her purse again, counting the same small handful of coins that had already betrayed her. Her throat tightened. The cashier at the counter was already glancing at her with impatience. A long sigh echoed from behind the register, the kind that made the world feel smaller. Lena lowered her head, her heart pounding like it could drown out the shame. The baby began to cry louder, and she rocked him gently, whispering for silence. But babies don't understand hunger's cruelty. They just feel it. Her trembling fingers picked up the smallest tin of baby milk, her only prayer clutched in a can. When she placed it on the counter, she tried to smile, though her lips barely obeyed. The cashier scanned it, the machine beeped, and the number flashed like a cruel joke. Lena laid down her coins one by one, counting slowly, as if time might add value to them. The cashier frowned, drumming her nails. "You're short," she said flatly. The words sliced through Lena's chest. She already knew, but hearing it aloud hurt more. I just need a few more days," Lena stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The woman shrugged, indifferent. "Store policy. I can't give it on credit." Lena's cheeks burned red. She looked at her baby, whose eyes were still wet, innocent, unaware. The world felt crueler in that moment than it ever had before. She thought of leaving, of walking out into the cold night, empty-handed again. Her heart broke at the thought of another sleepless night filled with her baby's hungry cries. The silence stretched until it was unbearable, until a deep, low voice cut through it. "I'll pay for it." Lena froze, every sound in the room fading except that voice. It was calm, steady, commanding. A voice that didn't ask, it decided. The cashier looked past her, startled, as if the air itself had shifted. Lena turned slowly, her breath caught halfway in her throat. And there he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that didn't belong in a grocery store at midnight. His presence filled the space like thunder before a storm. His eyes, cold gray with a hint of danger, met hers and didn't look away. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. He stepped closer, silent but deliberate, each footfall echoing against the linoleum floor. Without breaking eye contact, he handed his card to the cashier. "Put it on this," he said, voice smooth but edged with steel. The cashier blinked, hesitated, then obeyed as if the man's tone left no room for refusal. Lena shook her head quickly. "You don't have to do that," she murmured. But his gaze didn't soften. "I want to." The air between them thickened, charged with something she didn't understand. The cashier finished the transaction, sliding the bag toward her, eyes darting nervously between them. Lena hesitated, unsure whether to thank him or run. Her pulse raced. Something about him felt both protective and perilous. She finally managed, "I'll pay you back, H." He tilted his head slightly as though amused. "Don't worry about it." There was something in his voice, a weight, a promise, maybe even a warning. As he turned to leave, she noticed the faint scar along his jawline, sharp under the store's light. He moved with a kind of quiet authority, like a man who never needed to explain himself. The door chimed as he stepped out into the cold night. For a few seconds, she stood frozen, staring at the door, feeling like something unreal had just happened. A gust of wind followed his exit, brushing her hair across her face, carrying his scent, smoke and rain. She picked up the bag, her fingers trembling, the world still humming from his presence. She looked down at her baby, who'd gone quiet, eyes wide as if sensing something she couldn't name. As she stepped outside, the street was empty. No car, no man, just the soft sound of the night, but she could still feel his gaze, as though it lingered in the shadows. She hurried home through the narrow streets, clutching the bag to her chest. The city around her was silent, except for the sound of her footsteps and her heartbeat. Her thoughts replayed the moment again and again, the voice, the look, the strange stillness that followed. Why would he do that? She whispered to herself, but the night didn't answer. When she reached her small apartment, she closed the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. The baby stirred in her arms, soft and peaceful now, unaware of the storm that had begun. Lena fed him gently, tears threatening as she watched him drink, safe, satisfied for once. Her mind drifted back to the man, his eyes like winter, his tone unreadable. There had been no kindness in them, not really. Something deeper, darker. She could still hear his words echoing, "I'll pay for it." It wasn't just generosity, it felt like a vow, and vows like that never came without a price. She laid her baby in the crib and turned off the lamp, the room falling into quiet darkness. But sleep didn't come. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps, every shadow like his silhouette. And he sat by the window watching the rain, wondering if he was still out there. Some part of her wished he was. Another part whispered that she should pray he wasn't. Outside, a car engine started. Deep, smooth, familiar. Her breath hitched. She moved the curtain, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the glint of headlights vanishing around the corner. Still, she felt watched, protected, or perhaps claimed. She couldn't tell which. She touched her throat, trying to calm the flutter there. What kind of man walks into a stranger's struggle and acts like it's his responsibility? What kind of man looks at you like that and vanishes? She didn't know his name, but something about him was burned into her memory now. Her instincts screamed danger. Her heart whispered something far more reckless, because sometimes fate doesn't knock. It pays for the milk and disappears into the night. And as she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought haunted her, that kindness that dark could never come without a cost. And deep down, she knew he would return, and when he did, her life would never be the same again. The night was restless, rain whispering against the city like 1,000 untold secrets. It had been 3 days since that encounter, 3 days of silence that only made Lena's thoughts louder. Every time thunder rolled, she imagined the sound of that same car engine from that night, deep and smooth, echoing somewhere near. Sleep had become a stranger. She woke at every noise, expecting to see that gray-eyed man standing in the shadows, but he never came, until tonight. The rain came down in silver sheets as she left the diner, her thin jacket no match for the cold. The neon lights flickered above her, painting her reflection in puddles like fractured glass. Her shift had run late, her feet ached, her body weary, yet her mind kept circling back to him, the man with the sea. Carr, the man who had said, "I'll pay for it." She hated how his voice haunted her, how his eyes had followed her even in dreams. The streets were almost empty, only the hum of streetlights and the rhythm of rain keeping her company. She walked faster, clutching her bag close, every sound behind her making her nerves tighten. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine purred, low, expensive, and deliberate. She froze mid-step, her heart stumbling in her chest. Slowly she turned her head. A sleek black car idled at the corner, its headlights dimmed, windows tinted. Her breath clouded in the cold air. The driver's side window began to roll down with an almost sinister slowness, and there he was, Adrian. His presence was undeniable, even through the mist and rain. "You shouldn't walk here alone," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of authority that made her chest tighten. The umbrella he held barely shielded him, rain tracing the edge of his jaw, glinting against his scar. "Why do you care?" she snapped, though her voice trembled more from the shiver inside her than from the cold. He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd already decided to solve. "Maybe because I already paid for your safety once," he murmured, that half-smile returning, the one that was both dangerous and disarming. For a second, she forgot to breathe again. His words weren't kindness, they were possession wrapped in concern. When he stepped out of the car, she instinctively stepped back. He moved closer, opening the umbrella and holding it over her, his gloved hand brushing hers in the process. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a pulse through her body she couldn't ignore. "You don't have to follow me," she said, her tone defensive, but her heart betrayed her. It was beating far too fast. "I'm not following," he replied quietly. "I'm making sure you reach home alive." The way he said it wasn't heroic. It was matter of fact, as if danger were a constant in his world. They began to walk, the umbrella barely wide enough for both. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the faint cologne mixed with rain and smoke. His presence filled the space around her like an invisible armor, or a trap. "Do you do this for every woman you meet in a grocery store?" she asked bitterly. He chuckled under his breath, the sound deep and low. "No," he said simply. "Just the ones who make me forget who I am for a second." Her steps faltered, the meaning behind his words heavy, intimate, and terrifying. "And who are you exactly?" she whispered. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession could have been. The thunder cracked overhead, and for a moment his face was lit by a flash of lightning, and she swore she saw something in his eyes that looked like guilt. When they reached her street, the world felt quieter, the rain softer, as if even the city was holding its breath. He stopped at the edge of her apartment steps, watching her closely. "You should lock your door," he said, "and stay away from the alleys near the pier." She frowned, confused. "Why the pier?" He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because trouble's coming, and it doesn't always knock." His words sent a chill crawling up her spine. "You sound like you know it personally," she said cautiously. He gave her a look that was both warning and confession. "I do." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence, running down the umbrella and onto the cracked pavement between them. She studied his face, wondering how a man could look so dangerous and yet so broken at the same time. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why even care?" His lips curved into something unreadable. "Because the night I saw you," he said, "you looked at me like I wasn't a monster." Her breath caught. There it was again, that strange, aching honesty that made her chest hurt. He stepped back, adjusting his collar, the faintest trace of regret in his eyes. "Be careful who you trust, Lena. This city eats the gentle first." Then, before she could say another word, he turned away. His coat caught the wind as he walked back to the car, his figure fading into the rain like a ghost. The sound of the engine was low, smooth, and then gone, leaving her standing alone beneath the streetlight. But when she reached for her keys, she saw something glinting on the doormat, a folded piece of paper weighed down by a single raindrop. She picked it up with trembling fingers, her pulse loud in her ears. The note was written in elegant, firm handwriting. "You don't owe me, but I'm not done with you yet." Her heart skipped, a shiver running through her as if the words themselves carried heat. She looked up, half expecting to see him still there, watching. But the street was empty. Only the rain remained, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. Inside, her baby stirred, crying faintly, as if sensing the shift in her world. She pressed the note to her chest, her heart torn between fear and something far more dangerous, fascination. The night outside stretched endlessly, full of unseen eyes and unfinished promises. And though she didn't want to admit it, Lena knew, deep down, he hadn't left her world. He'd only stepped into the shadows of it. Somewhere, in the distance, that same black car lingered beneath the street lamp, engine off, waiting, as if the stranger who'd once paid for her milk had just begun to collect what fate truly owed him. The night after the note, Lena could not sleep. The sound of rain had stopped, but its ghost lingered in the silence, echoing inside her small apartment. Every creak in the hallway, Every car passing by outside made her flinch. Her fingers kept brushing the folded note on her bedside table. You don't owe me, but I'm not done with you yet. The words burned into her mind, both promise and warning. She told herself she should be afraid, that men like him didn't show up twice without reason. Yet some fragile part of her, the one that still remembered his eyes beneath the umbrella, hoped he would return. The hope scared her more than his power ever could. Days passed, and the world moved with quiet unease. The black car appeared sometimes, parked across the street, unmoving, silent. No one ever stepped out, but she could feel eyes on her, not predatory, but protective. Still, protection from a man like Adrian Moretti came with a price, and she didn't know if she was ready to pay it. The whispers started soon after. The women at the diner spoke of the man in the black suit, the one who owned half the city and ruled the other half through fear. His name carried weight. Adrian Moretti. It rolled through the streets like a dark legend, one people spoke only in low tones. Lena froze when she first heard it. The cup in her hand slipped and shattered against the floor, drawing everyone's eyes. Her coworker laughed nervously. What, you look like you've seen a ghost. You didn't cross paths with him, did you? Lena forced a weak smile. No, she lied, though her heart thundered inside her chest. The stranger who bought her baby's milk was the same man the world feared to even speak of. That night, the city felt heavier, as though it breathed around her in anticipation. She tried to convince herself it was coincidence. Maybe there were other men with gray eyes and scars, men who spoke like thunder and moved like smoke. But her heart refused the lie. He was everywhere now. Every shadow she passed seemed shaped like him. Every reflection in the window blurred into his face. When she closed her eyes, she saw him beneath the rain, his words echoing. I'm not done with you yet. On the third night, the sound of footsteps outside her door snapped her from her thoughts. Slow, heavy, certain. She froze, clutching her baby close. The footsteps stopped right outside. Silence fell like a blade. Her breath hitched, then a knock, soft, deliberate. Her hand trembled as she turned the knob. The door opened halfway, and there he was, Adrian. Standing in the dim hallway light, rain dripping from his collar, his suit darkened and heavy. His face was unreadable, but his eyes looked tired, almost haunted. You shouldn't be alone, he said, his voice low, almost gentle this time. Lena's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say. The air between them thickened with everything unspoken. Fear, curiosity, something dangerously close to longing. How did you find me? She whispered. He gave a ghost of a smile. I never lost you. He stepped inside, just far enough for the light to fall across his face. The scar beneath his eye looked deeper tonight, like it carried more than just pain. When he looked toward the crib, his entire expression shifted. The mask of control cracked for the briefest second. The baby stirred, making a soft sound, and something broke inside him. He knelt slightly, his eyes softening in a way she'd never seen before. He reminds me of someone I failed, he said, his voice lower than the rain outside. Lena frowned, uncertain if she'd heard him right. Someone you failed? She asked quietly. He nodded once, not looking at her. A boy, he said after a long pause. He didn't deserve the world he was born into. I tried to protect him, and I couldn't. His jaw tightened, his voice trembling just once before he caught it. For the first time, Adrian Moretti, the man who ruled the city with fear, looked utterly human, and that scared her even more. She took a hesitant step closer. Why tell me this? She asked. He finally met her eyes, and she saw something raw flicker there. Because when you look at me, he said slowly, you don't see the blood on my hands. You look at me like I'm still worth saving. The words hit her harder than she expected. For a heartbeat, the air between them pulsed, not with danger, but with something deeper, magnetic. She wanted to step back, to close the door, but her body wouldn't move. I don't know what you want from me, she whispered. I don't either, he said, and his honesty tears. Rye-fied her more than any lie could. The baby's soft coo broke the tension. Adrian's gaze flicked toward the crib again, and he inhaled sharply, as though the sight alone hurt him. Then he turned toward the door. I shouldn't be here, he said under his breath. My world and yours, they don't mix. Lena wanted to stop him, but her voice refused to come. He reached for the handle, his movements careful, controlled, the kind of control that hides chaos beneath. Adrian, she said softly, almost surprising herself. He paused but didn't turn. Why me? She asked. He looked over his shoulder, the faintest trace of sadness touching his mouth. Because you looked at me like I wasn't a monster, he said, his voice breaking around the last word. Then he left, the door closing behind him with a quiet finality that made her knees weak. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring at the door, feeling as if the air he left behind still carried his presence. Then she heard it, the faint echo of gunfire in the distance. Her blood ran cold. One shot, then another. It came from somewhere near the street where his car usually waited. She rushed to the window, heart pounding. The rain had started again, blurring the world into gray streaks. There, under the flickering streetlight, the black car still sat, but the driver's door was open. A figure was slumped inside, movement shadowed by the storm. She couldn't tell if it was him. Her breath caught in her throat. The city below seemed to hold its breath too, the night frozen in suspense. She wanted to run outside, to see, to know, but something in her heart whispered, don't. Not yet. Because whatever had begun between them wasn't over, not even close. As lightning split the sky, she saw a silhouette in the distance, tall, broad-shouldered, standing beside the car, watching her window. His face was hidden, but she could feel his eyes. And she knew, with terrifying certainty, Adrian Moretti wasn't the only shadow who had found her. The storm hadn't stopped since that night. Every morning, Lena woke to the sound of rain against the windows, like the city was trying to wash away something it couldn't forget. But it wasn't the thunder that haunted her. It was the memory of that gunfire. Days passed, and still there was no sign of Adrian, no car across the street, no shadow beneath the lamplight, only silence that pressed on her chest like a weight. She told herself it was better this way, safer. But her heart refused to listen. Sometimes, when she fed her baby in the quiet hours before dawn, she'd imagine his voice again, rough, calm, unshakable, the kind of voice that could command both fear and safety in the same breath. And though she'd never admit it aloud, she missed it. Then, one morning, she found an envelope slipped beneath her door. No name, no return address. Inside were crisp bills, enough to cover rent, groceries, even the hospital debt she'd been drowning under. Her hands shook as she stared at the money. No note, no signature. But she didn't need one. She knew. Adrian was alive, and he was still watching. At first she wanted to refuse it, to throw it away, but desperation clawed harder than pride. She took it, every bill feeling like a debt she'd never be able to repay. After that, things began to change quietly, like dominoes falling one after another. Her boss at the diner, the same man who once yelled at her for being late, suddenly became kind, patient, even apologetic. The landlord, who used to bang on her door every month, started leaving polite notes instead. And one evening, when two drunk men followed her home, they turned pale halfway down the block, because a sleek black car had appeared from nowhere, headlights slicing through the dark. The men vanished, and so did the car. It was as if the city itself now answered to him. But protection from a man like Adrian Moretti was never free. It came with invisible strings, tied around her life, tighter every day. She felt them every time she stepped outside, every time she looked over her shoulder, every time she saw a black car and her pulse stumbled. One evening, after work, she finally saw him again. He stood under a streetlight, cigarette smoke curling around him like fog, the glow from the ember tracing the edges of his jaw. His eyes found hers before she even spoke, as if he'd been waiting for her all along. You shouldn't be out here this late, he said. She folded her arms, anger and relief warring inside her. You're still following me. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. Following? No. Watching, maybe. She stepped closer, rain pooling beneath her shoes. Stop interfering in my life, she said, her voice shaking more from emotion than fear. The money, the job, the landlord? You think I don't know? He took a slow drag of his cigarette before answering, his tone unreadable. You mistake protection for control. Protection, she hissed. You think I want to owe you? You already do, he said quietly. His words hung between them like smoke, heavy and undeniable. She opened her mouth to argue, but movement in the shadows caught her eye. Two figures stepped out of the alley behind him, their faces hidden, glints of metal flashing under the dim streetlight. Knives. Before she could speak, one of them lunged. Everything after that happened too fast. Adrian moved like darkness given form, silent, brutal, efficient. His coat flared as he turned, disarming the first man with a snap of bone and a cry that split the night. The second came from the side, but Adrian was faster. His elbow met the man's jaw with a sickening crack, sending him sprawling onto the wet pavement. It was over in seconds. The world fell silent again, save for Lena's ragged breathing. Adrian stood there, chest rising and falling, his knuckles bloodied, rain dripping from his hair. The two men lay groaning on the ground, their knives scattered. He didn't even look at them. His eyes, cold, unshaken, were fixed only on her. For a long moment she couldn't speak, couldn't move. He was terrifying, yes, but the fear wasn't pure anymore. There was something else beneath it, something dangerous. Who are you? She breathed. He looked at her, the faintest flicker of something like regret crossing his face. Someone you shouldn't trust. The honesty in his voice sent a chill down her spine. She wanted to run, to grab her baby and disappear, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. He wiped the blood from his sleeve, the gesture casual, almost weary. They weren't after you, he said quietly. They were after me. You were just in the way. Just in the way? She whispered, anger sparking. You brought danger to my door, Adrian. He exhaled, long and tired. Danger was already at your door, Lena. I just decided to stand in front of it. Something inside her broke at that, because part of her wanted to believe him. Maybe she already did. The sirens in the distance grew louder, faint blue light flickering against the wet pavement. Adrian's gaze shifted toward the sound, then back to her. He took a slow step closer, his voice low. You should go inside. Tell them you didn't see anything. What about you? She asked. They can't touch me, he said, a small dark smile tugging at his lips. They never do. She didn't know what terrified her more, the truth in his tone or the sadness behind it. As she turned to leave, heart pounding, his voice stopped her. Lena, he said softly. She looked back, rain glistening on her face. You can hate me later, he murmured, his eyes burning through the dark. But tonight, you're mine to protect. The words sank deep, dangerous, and intimate, wrapping around her heart like a promise she didn't ask for. And as she walked away, her footsteps echoing through the rain, she couldn't shake the feeling that protection from a man like him was never a blessing. It was the beginning of a price she would one day have to pay. Rain dripped from the edges of her coat, Adrian opened the car door, his voice a quiet command in the chaos of flashing lights. Get in, Lena. She hesitated, her eyes darting between him and the bloodied street where two men still groaned. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe, he said, and though she wanted to argue, something in his tone, an edge of fear he tried to hide, made her obey. The car roared through the storm, city lights smearing across the windows like streaks of broken stars. Her baby stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, and she whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. Adrian drove in silence, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Every few seconds he checked the mirror, watching for shadows that might follow. They left the city behind. The streets turned narrow, lined with whispering pines and fog curling low over the ground. Finally, the car slowed before an iron gate. Beyond it rose a mansion, massive, cold, and beautiful in a way that felt wrong. The kind of place built for secrets, not comfort. He stepped out first, his coat flaring in the wind, and opened her door without meeting her eyes. "You'll stay here tonight," he said, voice quiet. "No one will touch you here." She clutched her child closer. "You think I'm safe with you?" His lips curved, not in amusement, but pain. "You're safer with me than without me." Inside, the mansion was silent, the kind of silence that echoed. Candlelight flickered against marble floors and gold frames. Shadows clung to the corners like ghosts. The air smelled faintly of rain, whiskey, and something darker, gunpowder maybe, the scent of a man who lived with danger the way others lived with air. Adrian motioned toward a long dining table already set with 2 plates and untouched food. "Eat," he said simply. Lena stared at him, then at the elegant room, disbelief creeping in. "You planned this?" "I plan everything," he replied, pulleys, hung out a chair for her. "Except you." She sat, unsure whether from exhaustion or curiosity. He poured her water, his movements precise, his eyes distant. The candlelight carved his face into sharp planes of shadow and light. He looked like both a king and a ghost of one. For a while they ate in silence, her with hesitant bites, him barely touching his plate. Finally, he spoke. "Do you want to know what I am, Lena?" "I already do," she said, though her voice trembled. He met her eyes. "No, you know what people say, but you don't know me." She waited, her pulse thudding in her throat. He leaned back, gaze far away. "I've built my life on power and blood," he said slowly. "Every decision I've made, every deal, every death, was meant to keep control, because without control, men like me fall fast." His eyes flicked to hers. "And then I saw you, a woman counting coins for milk, and for the first time in years, I couldn't control what I felt." Her breath hitched. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. "Why me?" "Because you didn't flinch," he said. "Everyone looks at me like they see the monster they've heard about. You looked at me like I was just a man." Lena gripped her glass tighter, her voice barely a whisper. "You terrify me, Adrian." He smiled faintly, a broken thing. "Good, you should." He leaned closer across the table, shadows deepening in his eyes. "But you terrify me more." Her heart stuttered. "Why?" "Because you make me feel human," he said, the words falling from his lips like a confession he didn't plan to give. "And that's the most dangerous thing anyone's ever done to me." For a moment, neither moved. The air between them changed, thick, charged, alive. She could hear the fire crackling in the distant hearth, the soft drip of rain outside, the faint tremor of her own heartbeat. He reached across the table, hesitating just once before his fingers brushed hers. Heat flared instantly, real, raw, terrifying. She should have pulled away, but she didn't. His touch was both promise and warning, rough and careful all at once. "Adrian," she whispered, unsure if it was a plea or a protest. "Don't," he murmured. "Don't say my name like that unless you want me to lose what's left of my restraint." Her breath caught. She didn't move when he stood, rounding the table. The world seemed to shrink until there was only the sound of his footsteps and the pounding in her chest. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. He reached out, tracing a strand of wet hair from her cheek, his touch lingering a moment too long. His eyes softened. "You should be afraid of me," he said quietly. "I am," she admitted, her voice shaking. "Then why aren't you running?" She didn't have an answer. He leaned down, his breath ghosting against her lips. The moment stretched thin, fragile as glass. When he finally kissed her, it was slow, aching, desperate, like he was searching for something he'd lost long ago. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. It was real. Her heart raced as his hand cupped her jaw, as the world outside disappeared, leaving only the warmth of his mouth and the chaos in her soul. She should have stopped him. She didn't. The kiss deepened, an unspoken war between fear and longing. And when he pulled back, their foreheads touched, both of them breathing hard. "This is wrong," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but it's the only thing that feels right." For the first time, she saw something break inside him, behind the power, the danger, the legend. He wasn't the monster people whispered about. Not entirely. He was a man trapped in the walls he'd built, bleeding quietly beneath the armor. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask what came next, when his phone buzzed on the table. He froze. The sound shattered everything. He straightened, eyes turning cold, the softness gone in an instant. He snatched the phone up, voice low and sharp. "What is it?" A pause. Then his expression changed, tightened. His jaw clenched as he listened, every trace of warmth vanishing from his face. He ended the call and turned to her, his tone a quiet blade. "They've found you." Her stomach dropped. "What?" He was already moving, pulling open a drawer, retrieving a sleek black gun. "Pack what you need, now." "Adrian, what's happening?" His eyes met hers, no longer human, but pure fire and command. No questions, just move. And as thunder rolled outside, Lena realized that whatever fragile safety she'd found inside these walls was gone. The hunter had become the hunted, and this time, Adrian's darkness might not be enough to save them both. The safe house. The rain hadn't stopped when they fled. It fell like shards of glass against the windshield, thunder chasing them through the endless night. Adrian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, eyes cutting through the storm with that same ruthless focus that had built empires and destroyed men. Beside him, Lena clutched her baby tight, her heart pounding with every flash of lightning. She didn't dare ask where they were going. His silence was command enough. Hours passed before the city lights vanished, replaced by the lonely hum of the countryside. The air grew colder, quieter, heavier. When he finally stopped, it was before an old stone house hidden between pine and fog, its windows dark, its walls scarred by time. "Go," he said softly, stepping out first, scanning the shadows like a soldier who trusted no peace. Inside, the safe house smelled of dust and rain, but there was warmth from a small fire flickering in the hearth. Guards moved silently outside, shadows blending with night. Lena sat near the fire, the baby asleep against her chest, watching Adrian check every door, every window, every corner, as though the walls themselves might betray them. "Do you ever stop?" she asked quietly. He didn't look up. "Not when the world wants what's mine." She wanted to ask if that included her, but fear and something else, something far more dangerous, kept her silent. He poured whiskey into a glass, his hands steady though his eyes were. "Int. You think this is safety," he murmured. "It's only a pause before the next storm." His words sent a chill through her. That night she couldn't sleep. Every sound felt alive, every flicker of light a ghost. Somewhere in the hall, she heard his footsteps pacing, steady, restless, haunted. She rose, careful not to wake her child, and followed the sound. The corridor was dim, lined with peeling wallpaper and old portraits whose painted eyes seemed to watch. She found him by the window, shirtless, a faint sheen of sweat glistening under the moonlight. His back was a map of scars, stories of violence carved into flesh. One long mark crossed his shoulder, jagged and deep. "You've killed," she whispered from the doorway, her voice trembling more from what she saw in his eyes than from the scar itself. He didn't turn immediately. "For survival," he said finally, low and rough, "but never for love. Until now." The words struck her harder than the storm outside. When he turned, his gaze caught hers, sharp, pained, yet tender in a way she had never seen before. "You don't understand what you've done to me, Lena," he said, stepping closer. "You've made me want something I swore I'd buried." Her breath faltered as he stopped just inches away, the air between them thick with everything they hadn't said. His hand lifted, hesitant at first, then sure, fingers tracing the curve of her jaw, the damp strand of hair that clung to her cheek. "You shouldn't touch me," she breathed, though she didn't move. "I told myself that," he murmured. every night, and every night I failed. The world outside faded, the rain, the guards, even fear itself. There was only the sound of their breathing and the ache that had been waiting too long. His thumb brushed her lip, and something inside her broke, the dam of restraint, the illusion of safety. When his mouth found hers, it wasn't gentle, it was hung. Wry, desperate, the kiss of a man who had forgotten what mercy felt like. She clung to him, trembling, tasting the fire and sorrow that lived beneath his calm. His hands framed her face, then her waist, drawing her closer until there was no space left for reason. Between them, the storm outside grew wild, echoing the one inside. He kissed her like he was confessing every sin, like each touch was a promise and a punishment. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed together, neither could breathe. "This is wrong," she whispered again, though her voice betrayed her. "I know," he said, his breath warm against her skin. "But I don't care." She felt his heart against hers, fast, raw, unguarded. For a moment, she wasn't the poor woman he saved, and he wasn't the man who ruled shadows. They were just two broken souls finding warmth in each other's ruin. But the world never forgave moments like this. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, soft, but enough to snap them back to reality. Adrian's head lifted, eyes narrowing. "Stay here," he said sharply, pulling away. She caught his arm. "Adrian." "Shh." His hand brushed her cheek once more. Then he moved, silent as a predator. She waited, heart pounding, listening to the echo of his footsteps fade. Minutes passed, then the faint click of a lock, the low murmur of voices outside. She couldn't hear the words, but the tone, cold, clipped, told her everything wasn't right. She picked up her baby and backed into the corner, fear clawing its way up her throat. Adrian returned, face tight. "They found the decoy route," he muttered. "It won't be long before they trace this one." Her stomach twisted. "Then what do we do?" He looked at her with an ache she didn't understand. "We survive. Together." That night, neither slept. They sat by the dying fire, the distance between them filled with everything that could end them. He told her stories of his past, not the Empire, but the boy who lost his family before he ever learned what love meant. She listened, tears glimmering in her eyes, and when his voice broke, she reached for his hand. It was the Saoi, first time anyone had touched him without fear. He squeezed back, as though anchoring himself to her existence. When dawn approached, pale light slipped through the curtains, painting gold on the walls. For one fragile moment, peace existed. Then the world shattered. The first bullet cracked through the window, exploding glass across the room. Lena screamed as Adrian dove forward, pulling her down, his arm wrapping around her and the baby. Gunfire erupted, loud, merciless, tearing through wood and silence alike. He fired back through the shattered glass, eyes burning with fury, blood already staining his sleeve. "Stay down!" he barked, dragging her toward the wall. The child cried, Lena's heart breaking with every sound. She pressed herself against the floor, trembling. Adrian crouched beside her, breathing hard, his body between her and death. Another shot grazed his shoulder. He grunted, teeth clenched, but didn't falter. "Adrian," she sobbed, reaching for him. He turned his head, meeting her gaze, a faint, grim smile ghosting his lips. "I told you," he whispered through the chaos. "You're safer with me than without me." Blood dripped onto the floor, bright as rubies in the dawn light, and as the storm of bullets raged on, Lena realized one truth she could no longer escape. She hadn't just fallen for a dangerous man. She had fallen into his war. The gunfire was deafening. It tore through walls, glass, and air alike, each shot a heartbeat closer to death. Adrian's voice cut through the chaos, low and fierce. "Stay behind me," he shouted, firing back with cold precision. The safe house that had once felt like sanctuary now burned with hellfire and betrayal. Lena could barely hear her own screams over the roar of bullets. Smoke curled through the room, thick and choking, while the baby cried, terrified. She pressed her child against her chest and followed Adrian's movement. is trusting him more than her own heartbeat. His blood left dark streaks on the walls as he moved, fast, wounded, unstoppable. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the metallic sting of blood and fear. Outside, shadows advanced, his enemies, relentless, hungry for the final blow. Adrian's jaw clenched. He turned to her, eyes blazing with a mix of fury and desperation. Go, now, he barked, grabbing her arm and dragging her toward the far wall. There's a passage behind the fireplace. Move! But she didn't move. Not when she saw the red blooming across his side, spreading fast, soaking his white shirt until it turned crimson. You're bleeding, she whispered, her voice breaking. It's nothing, he gritted out, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the lie. I've had worse. He stumbled once, catching himself against the wall, and she saw the way his vision flickered, his breath quickened. The man who had seemed untouchable now looked painfully human. Adrian, please, she begged, tears mixing with soot. Come with me. His hand cupped her face, shaking slightly. You have to live, Lena, for him. His gaze dropped to the baby cradled in her arms. I won't leave you, she said fiercely. Not again. Another explosion rocked the house, fire leaping up the drapes, painting the room in shades of red and terror. Adrian shoved her toward the hidden passage, his voice rough and final. Go! She resisted, clutching his arm, but he pushed her through the narrow opening, slamming the hidden door halfway before another burst of bullets hit the walls behind him. Adrian! She screamed, her voice shattering like glass. He turned one last time, a faint smile tugging at his blood-stained lips. You were the first good thing to happen to me, he said softly. Then his knees gave out, and he fell. The door slammed shut between them, sealing her in darkness. Lena pounded on it, screaming his name until her throat burned, but no answer came, only the echo of fire and chaos on the other side. The baby's cries filled the narrow tunnel, the sound slicing through her like a blade. She stumbled forward through the passage, smoke trailing behind her, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Every step felt like betrayal. She didn't know how long she ran, minutes or hours. It all blurred together in a haze of tears and terror. When she finally emerged, the night sky greeted her with cold rain and flashing red lights in the distance. She collapsed onto the wet ground, clutching her baby, watching the safe house burn like a dying star in the woods. The flames swallowed everything, his world, his secrets, and him. No, she whispered, voice breaking into sobs. No, please, no. Sirens wailed somewhere nearby, a haunting requiem for everything she had lost. She screamed his name into the night over and over until her voice was gone. When strong hands lifted her from the ground, she didn't fight. Paramedics, police, strangers shouting words she couldn't hear. Her baby cried in someone's arms as they rushed her toward the ambulance. The last thing she saw before her vision faded was the fire collapsing inward, sparks rising into the storm, and she thought she saw his silhouette, just for a heartbeat, standing in the glow. Then everything went black. When she awoke, the world was too white. The sharp smell of antiseptic filled her lungs. Machines beeped steadily beside her, alien and cold. She blinked hard, trying to piece together the fragments of memory, the safe house, the fire, Adrian's voice, his blood. Adrian, she whispered, sitting up too fast. Pain sliced through her ribs, but she didn't care. Her eyes darted around the hospital room, empty except for her child asleep in a crib nearby. Panic clawed at her chest. She ripped the IV from her hand and stumbled out of bed, calling for him, for anyone who could tell her where he was. Nurses rushed in, voices calm but distant. Ma'am, please lie down. Where is he? She cried. The man who brought me here. Adrian rose. Sikai. They exchanged looks, silent, uneasy, telling her everything without saying a word. No body was found, one of them said gently. The house, it collapsed before the fire team arrived. Her world froze. That's not possible, she whispered. He was right behind me. She sank to her knees, tears spilling freely now. He promised me. The nurse knelt beside her, trying to comfort her, but Lena felt hollow, like the world had emptied out. Days passed, maybe weeks. She stayed in that hospital room, holding her baby close, waiting for a message, a sign, anything. But there was nothing, no body, no goodbye, just silence. At night, she'd stare out the window, the city lights flickering like dying stars, and imagine his voice in the wind. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she could still feel his hand on her cheek, still hear his last words echoing in the dark. "You were the first good thing to happen to me." And as the world moved on without him, Lena began to wonder, had he truly died in that fire? Or was the devil who once loved her still out there, watching from the shadows, bleeding for a woman who had become his salvation? The hospital door creaked open in the dead of night. No footsteps, no voice, only a folded black envelope slipped beneath the door. And on it, written in his unmistakable hand, was her name. Lena. The black envelope lay untouched on her nightstand for days. Every time Lena looked at it, her heart raced like the echo of a memory she couldn't silence. She traced her fingers over her name, written in that same sharp, elegant hand, and felt the world tilt. The handwriting was his. It couldn't be. Adrian was gone. The fire had swallowed him whole. But still, her soul whispered otherwise. One night, when the moon spilled silver through the hospital window, she finally opened it. Inside, a single folded sheet carried 5 words that shattered her breath. "If you ever need me." Nothing more. No signature, no explanation, just that quiet promise, bleeding ink onto her shaking fingers. Days turned to weeks, and the world outside her grief began to move again. The new, it's called the attack, a gang war. No mention of Adrian Moretti, no trace of the men who'd come for them. It was as if the devil himself had vanished, leaving only smoke in his wake. Lena moved into a small apartment above a bakery, trying to build a life from ashes. Each morning, she'd hold her baby close, whispering stories of angels and monsters who learned how to love. Some nights, she'd hear footsteps in the alley, the low hum of an engine idling too long, and her chest would ache with a strange comfort, like someone unseen still kept watch. She took a job at a nearby flower shop, the scent of lilies and roses filling the hollow corners of her days. Time softened the edges of her pain, but never erased them. The scar remained, invisible but deep, a mark of a love that had burned too bright to die. Every lullaby she sang carried pieces of him. Every heartbeat was a whisper. "You were the first good thing to happen to me." Then came the afternoon that changed everything. The sun hung low, gold spilling through the streets like spilled honey. Lena, with her child toddling beside her, wandered into the grocery store she hadn't entered since that night. The night that had rewritten her fate. The air smelled the same. Cold aisles, buzzing lights, the faint hum of a broken refrigerator. She paused by the baby formula aisle, the same shelf where her world had cracked open once before. Her fingers brushed over a can, and memory flooded her, coins clinking, a voice saying, "I'll pay for it." She blinked hard, swallowing the ache rising in her chest. Then she froze. He was there. Adrian, standing at the end of the aisle, alive. His presence filled the air before her mind could believe it. He looked different, older, thinner, a faint scar running along his temple. But those eyes, those storm-gray eyes, still carried the same quiet intensity that once tore through her walls. The world stopped spinning. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, he thought she was dreaming. He didn't move, only watched her, his lips curving into that faint, dangerous smile she'd memorized in another life. "You still owe me a thank you," he said softly. Voice, that low, steady rumble, hit her like thunder wrapped in silk. Her bag fell from her hand, cans clattering against the tile. Tears blurred her vision as her heart broke open all over again. She took one step, then another, and then she was running, closing the distance between them, crashing into his arms like the tide returning to shore. He caught her, arms wrapping around her tight, strong, trembling. For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them faded. No shoppers, no noise, just the quiet pulse of two souls finding each other again. When she finally looked up, her voice cracked. "You paid for milk that day," she whispered, her hands clutching his shirt as if afraid he'd disappear again. "But you gave me everything after." He smiled, faint and fragile, brushing his thumb across her cheek, wiping a tear that wouldn't stop. "No, Lena," he murmured. "You paid for my soul." The words broke her. Not in pain, but in relief, in love, in the realization that he was truly here, alive, standing before her, breathing the same air. The child in her arms stirred, wide-eyed, and Adrian's expression softened even more. He reached out, hesitant at first, then gently touched the boy's hair. "He's grown," Adrian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Looks just like you." Lena smiled through her tears. "He has your stubborn eyes." He laughed quietly, that same low sound that once scared her and saved her all at once. "Maybe he'll make better choices than I did," he said. "I doubt that," she replied softly, "because one of your choices saved us both." The silence that followed was full, warm, sacred. Around them, the grocery store kept humming, life going on as though the universe hadn't just rearranged itself in the aisle between them. The past didn't matter anymore. Not the blood, not the scars, not the ghosts that lingered. Only this moment did. The reunion of two broken hearts who somehow found their way back. Not through fate, but through a love that refused to die. Outside, the rain began again. Soft, cleansing, forgiving. They walked out together, his arm around her, her head against his shoulder, their child nestled between them. The city stretched before them, the same streets that once held so much pain now shimmering under the glow of second chances. He looked down at her as they stepped into the light. "You still afraid of me?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, her smile small but sure. "No, I'm afraid of losing you again." He stopped, tilting her chin up with one finger, his gaze steady, full of everything he'd never said. "Then don't," he whispered, "because I'm done running." And for the first time, she believed him. The wind carried the scent of rain and new beginnings as they walked toward a future neither of them thought they'd ever see. A world where love didn't need to be pure to be real, it only needed to survive. Sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in light. It comes with scars, danger, and the quiet promise that says, "I'll pay for it." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwoven Tales, and press the bell icon so you never miss another story that speaks to your soul.